Oh, welcome to Sunny's Book Club, Stag Dance by Torrey Peters edition, everyone. Um, I I wonder how much longer this is. I was contemplating reading like the Dear Reader letter in the front. Is that in the finished copies? Did you guys
I
see?
don't think so.
I'm definitely gonna read it then because I thought it set up the book really well. Um, Instead of the blurb, it's a little long, so bear with me for reading aloud. But I think she just like frames the book really beautifully in it. So I'm gonna do that. Dear reader, thank you for taking a chance on Stag Dance. It took me about a decade to write, a decade that started with the period just after my gender transition and ran through the year or so after I published my first novel. Each time that I encountered something puzzling, incongruous, upsetting, or even infuriating, I found myself wanting to figure it out in narrative form, usually a novel or a novella. Fiction can be a great test case for living. You just give your character problems similar to your own or ones more extreme, then leave it to them to solve, or at least to better articulate. But looking back over what I wrote, I found that much of the work asked an ambiguous question by ghostly subtext. What does it even mean to be trans? Obviously, in general or political sense, this question has been asked and answered many times over. But to address the puzzles put to me by living life, I felt I needed to evade the usual approaches to the question. I needed to find a backdoor approach. Let me put it this way. Almost everything I read about transness seeks to complicate, destabilize, or even break down the binary between female and female, male and female, masculinity and femininity, men and women. That's all well and good, but to be honest, after my first novel, Detransition Baby, I felt less invested in exploring those distinctions. What has always interested me, is the binary between cis and trans. What is the line? Is it even a binary? Maybe in certain respects, we're all a little bit trans. Everyone has a gender, and throughout life, we can't all help but move somewhat around in our gender. Imagine a woman who at age 22 is very feminine, but at age 55 has become a carpenter and finds that overt femininity of her youth doesn't suit her. Has she changed gender? If trans just means movement, and she moved in her gender, even if entirely on the female side of the spectrum, is she therefore transgender in an unconventional usage? This seems sort of theoretical, but that's where Stag Dance comes in. This is my attempt to explore the emotional, lived questions the binary between cis and trans provokes, to feel around in the murky and taboo edges of transness, even when it's not even clear what transness or cisness even is, where imperfect politics and auteur sexuality lurk. Where are we just where we are just people yearning, crashing, loving, and messing up. I wrote these four pieces across genres, across time periods, and yes, across and within genders. I hope that the variety reveals a constant. By the end of Stag Dance, I hope your own views and certainties may have gotten a shake so that you can't say for sure who counts as trans, who counts as cis, not only within the book, but even and perhaps more freely when you look up from the page. With gratitude for your reading time, Torrey Peters. So that wasn't in your book. What a bummer. I feel like they should have included that for the finished copies as well. But I thought that was really just a great framing on the first page before you even got into the rest of the stories in the novella. So yeah, let's just open it up like usual and give our first impressions of the collection as a whole. I'd be curious if anyone read Detransition Baby, what you thought of this book in general, and how your reading experience went. Brittany.
Yeah, I think this one was a really important one for me to read, just to see trans characters or non-cis characters maybe in different contexts. Like I the whole time I was like, wow, Tori just has a big brain. Like it was like I was so impressed. Like, how do you come up with this? And something that made me feel better was I listened to that interview, like LARB Radio Hour. And at the end, Tori said that the hope is that people maybe feel these stories first and feel their way through things before, as a way like to begin thinking about it, like feel it first. And yeah, that made me feel better because I'm still wrapping my head around some of this. But um, yeah, I just thought they were so interesting. And yeah, I'm just really impressed by these stories.
Love it.
And I did read Detransition Baby. Um, and I can't remember. what I think I guess something that was interesting too that Tori said is that maybe she like wouldn't have written Detransition Baby if she had known like there'd be such a big audience for it. And I mean, these stories were wild too. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah, I think with both books, just really found them so intriguing and really appreciated that perspective.
So I haven't read Detransition Baby, but it's been on my list. But I really like her writing. Like she's just such a good writer. Um, and it's interesting about that author's note because I feel like that gives me a completely different perspective on the book now because the thing I kept going back to with sort of the through line of these stories was like a sense of vulnerability. And that's sort of how I was like framing them as a collection. And I love short stories. Um, Also, I thought it was interesting the mention of pigs and like throughout all of the stories too, sort of. Um, but yeah, no, I really liked it. It surprised me, I think, even though I was prepared for it to be not kooky, but I mean some of the premise of like stag dance is like a little kooky, right? And I say that with kooky being a good thing. But it still surprised me and I loved it, especially the ending.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. I think it also surprised me. I wasn't expecting to hate it. I've never read anything by Torrey Peters before. I haven't read Detransition Baby. I had never heard of Detransition Baby before Stag Dance. So now I'm really interested in reading Detransition Baby. I feel like the topic of transness and the trans community is not something that I'm really super knowledgeable about. And so with the blurb that CJ read us also kind of re help me is helping me reframe it a little bit in terms of like how it's not like a linear thing, and it's just um it's convoluted in all the ways that being a human is convoluted and arguing over the semantics of what being trans means and like all that stuff I think reframed the story
Sorry, there is
better.
nothing to repeat.
Whoa. Ghost?
Oh my God, that scared me. My Sonos. My Sonos. What the hell?
Like ghost?
Oh, okay. Keep going.
Anyway,
Sorry.
sorry to summon things, but I really liked Stag Dance. I thought it was good. I'm not a big short story collection person, and the fact that I was able to move through this as quickly as I did, um, ignoring all of my other responsibilities like homework, I was like, wow, okay, this is really good. So I really did enjoy this a lot.
Love it. I loved it too. I read The Transition Baby and really remember liking it. But it's definitely, and that did have like a wrestling with, I guess, the respectability politics of being trans, which I think is really what this collection is interrogating. And so is The Transition Baby. It's like your gender, it's like a moving target, you know what I mean? And it has flexibility and willingness to change. And society really wants um gender to be confined and like a good trans person is, you know, has to get top surgery, has to get bottom surgery, has to have feminine facialization surgery. Like they really still want you to adhere to kind of the societal standards of what a woman looks like if you're saying you want to like move throughout the gender spectrum. So I really loved how that was an interrogation of that with like the detransitioning and deciding like actually I don't feel like a woman anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like and that being a valid choice. And obviously, like I thought the use of genre here as I guess a driving force of also malleability and that kind of changeability and metamorphosis of what it means to move through the world was really smart. And I just love how each of these stories just felt completely different from one another within genre itself, right? They're all just in different parts of reality, which I think gender is too. It's so fucking weird, like that this is just what we're doing. And I enjoyed my time with it immensely. So I think we'll like just move through each story. I just finished this last night. I have a lot of reading I'm doing for work right now, so I'm put off my personal reading, but it's fresh in my brain. And yeah, let's maybe start with Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones, which is sci-fi speculative post-apocalyptic story. I'd be curious to know if you guys had any thoughts about this and where it landed for you in the like ranking of enjoyment for the rest of the stories in the collection.
I was really excited to talk about this one, so I'm gonna go first. I think CJ, you and I had a small conversation about it, and I could have read like this could have been the whole book, and I
Yeah.
would have been totally fine with that. Like this could have been the entire book, and I'd have been like, this knocked like my socks off. I thought it was really cool just because it was like, I don't know, I would never have thought of making gender like an infection like that, and it was just super cool. Like I thought it was just so unique. And when the story ended, I was really disappointed. Like I knew it was a short story, but I was like, wait, where's
Yeah.
the rest? So like if she came out with like a full-length novel of just that short story, I would totally read it.
So Manhunt, is anybody familiar with the book Manhunt?
Oh, is
I
that similar?
started that.
Yes.
Is
I'm
it?
trying to remember what the author's name is. She just came out with another book more recently. I listened to the audiobook, which
Mm,
um hold on, let me find this real quick. Who was the author? I read it probably, oh, Gretchen Felker Martin.
mhm.
Oh shoot. Sorry, my phone's freaking out. So it's a very similar premise. It's less literary, I would say, not that it's bad writing, but it's much more thrillerish. I also would say if you are sensitive to Boston accents, do not listen to the audiobook. My father has a very thick Boston accent, and the Boston accent that was done in the audiobook was not good to me.
Oh no.
But that might just be a me thing. I was like, this is a really bad Boston accent. But it's pretty fun, especially like if you're looking for more of that gender apocalyptic. She has a different take on it, but that's exactly. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like Manhunt. So that's my little two cents as far as that book and recommendation.
Interesting.
That is interesting. I started Manhunt, I think it was like a year or two ago, and I DNF'd it. I
Oh
didn't,
yeah.
I did, but I think I gave it to Sunny's actually.
Really?
I think so, yeah. So somebody took it. It was in really good condition, but I couldn't, I don't know, I think it was the writing because it wasn't super like, I don't want to say not literary, but it was just
It's
there was a lot going on, and I was like, okay, I'm like, I can't do this right now.
Yeah,
But
it's
maybe I'll
sort
have
of
to revisit it.
to me, and I listened to it just because that's the what was available at the library at the time. It's a little YA-ish and it's like pacing and writing. And I don't say that as like a bad thing because I love some YA.
Mhm.
Um, but I also at first I had to get used to that tone.
Yeah, I'll have to revisit it.
Yeah, I really liked the story. I also loved in Tori's interview on LARB how like we want to be in community with people who are share identities with us, especially marginalized people. And you have this like ethos of the T for T of it all, like, you know, trans girls for trans girls, like we support each other no matter what. But the reality is like people are still fucking bitches sometimes at the end of the day. And like you have to be in community with people you don't agree with. And I loved how she spoke to that and how the story kind of played out with Lexi and I forget what the main character is, but Lexi and the main character of her like showing up in a different phase of her life and them having to like work with each other or you know rescue each other in a literal way from danger and like even isolation in this world. I thought that was pretty cool. my coworker is a trans woman, and I was talking to her about this book because she didn't really like the transition baby. And she was like, "Oh, is Infect Your Friends in it?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "That's like lore. Like that
Mhm.
story's been around for like 12 years." And Torrey Peters self-published it like, over a decade ago. And it kind of like every trans girl has read that book, and it's kind of been distributed like in our community. And like T for T is like real. Like people literally have tattoos of it. And that's like a real thing in Seattle. And I was like, damn. So I like love that little lore of subculture of like this having kind of that DIY punk like distribution in the direct community, which I think is very Torrey Peters. Like if you guys follow her on Instagram, she like rides a motorcycle and is like homesteading in the middle of nowhere, Vermont. And she's just like a fucking cool old crust punk who is a writer now. And I'm like, love. Love that vibe. Um, I also loved how like in the context of legislation kind of cracking down on like all gender affirming care, how this kind of turned that on its head of being like everyone would have to choose its gender. Like I think you see a lot of trans activists right now being like, getting your eyelashes filled is gender affirming care, men having hair transplants is gender affirming care. Like, everything you do to make yourself feel good in your gender presentation can be cataloged in that way. And this just took that to the extreme. You know what I mean? Like you have to literally have medical procedures to get the hormone access that you need. And there's like a black market of pigs for it. Yeah. I'm rambling. Any other thoughts on Infect Your Friends?
This one was, I think, harder to wrap my head around, especially reconciling the fact, like I felt similarly. I mean, I don't know, like when I saw Mickey 17 recently,
Mm.
and it's like pretty absurd, but also too real. And I kind of felt similarly about this story. Like you could maybe see it happening, but it's also absurd. And just how, like, it made me think about how, like, things have gotten so overcomplicated when in reality, if we didn't have all these societal norms and expectations and gender norms, like this, like people being just how they feel and not needing to label everything definitively, would just be simple, but it's just so complicated.
Yeah, I should really highlight. It always pisses me off when we're in book club, and I'm like, I wish I was an annotator.
Yeah.
I used to like bookmark the books, but then I wouldn't write down why I bookmarked it, and I'm just like, let me read that again. And so I stopped doing that because I was like, clearly it's not efficient. So, but I will. One thing I did want to say about this first story before we move on is I did have to look up a couple terms because I was like, what does she mean by oh, what is it called? The boys, the auntie boys?
Mhm.
Mm.
I didn't know what that was. And I still don't know if that's an actual term that is used or if that's something she created for this particular short story. But I,
Term.
is it? Okay,
Yeah.
I did look it up and I was like, okay, that makes sense. I already forgot what it means.
I love
But
that too, and that's how detransition baby was too. There's so much in world like vernacular that
mhm,
she doesn't lay out for the reader.
right.
And again, it's like a normalization of these people's lived experiences and like how there's a whole different vocabulary set. And like it's not really on trans people or her as a writer to define it for us, which I think
Exactly.
is great.
Even the lumberjack stuff, which obviously wasn't necessarily true. I was like Googling, like, but I also grew up in a household where it's like, you don't know the word, you go to the dictionary. And now we
Yeah.
have Google, which is like my lifeblood. So
Yeah.
I'm like happy to, in fact, I kind of almost like when I have a book and I'm like looking stuff up and learning because I'm like, I feel like there's not necessarily a ton of chances to do this in real life. and it's probably
No.
good for my brain to look up like a random word or a
Yeah.
phrase or, you
Yeah,
know.
So I did appreciate that because obviously it's not on them. Like I'm not expecting like a
totally.
glossary of like, well, what does this mean? Like you're not doing the work for me. Like no, I have to do the work myself to like figure out like what does this mean? Like what does this, provide for the context of the story. And so I thought that was pretty cool that I had to do that. Um, just, the more you know. The more you know.
The more you know.
Exactly. The more you know.
Um, yeah, let's maybe move on to the chaser, which is, I guess, the like young adult in
hmm
reality romance.
Boarding school like
Yeah.
moment. Yeah.
How did you guys feel about this one? This one was sad.
It was
Oh, yeah.
sad.
It was so good though for a short story. That is sort of the arc that I look for in a short story where I don't know, it just like but I also love like a boarding school or coming of age short story and it hit all the right notes for me. I actually think it might be my favorite out of the grouping. It was it just was so good. I don't know. I don't have anything profound to say, but
Yeah. At first I was like, oh, what's his name? The,
Robbie, or no, Robbie is the,
Yeah, I couldn't remember either. Do we get a
Robbie
name?
is the roommate, right? And
hmm,
then
Yeah.
he what is
I
no,
don't know if
not
he's
Tommy.
named.
like how none of us know.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe we did get one, but I don't
Oh
remember.
no, yeah. Robbie's the name of the roommate, but then
Hmm.
I don't think we ever do get a name
Yeah,
for.
he's not named.
So anyway, but it's Robbie who I had beef with. I'm like, "Ugh, why are you being so mean? Like, why can't you just like say what happened and like why wouldn't you like speak up or say something? But then towards the end, I'm like, no, Robbie, yeah, you should have
Yeah.
said anything. And so it was just like a big roller coaster in such a short story, obviously, but in such like small amount of pages. I was like on an emotional roller coaster with this one. And I thought it did represent YA really well, just because, like, young adults, teenagers, they don't know how to express themselves. And, like, they're also going through all of these emotions of gender and, like, sexuality and, like, how to define themselves. And not only that, they're in this weird boarding school where they, like, have this independence and have to grapple with that. And, like, their own little, like, sub communities in that boarding school. And so all of that piled onto a teenager is a lot. And it was just really good. I really liked that one too. But yeah, at first I had beef with Robbie, and then I was like, okay, Robbie, I understand. But then towards the end, I was like, ugh, like the dad's not gonna understand. But then we don't get anything else. It's just like,
Yeah.
well, I hope they're okay. Like I hope, even though like it's a fake character and like they're not real, but people live these experiences. So
Yeah.
so good. It was so good.
Yeah, I think this one might have been my favorite too. It really stuck with me because it is kind of a classic story, but it has some really unique details. Like I don't necessarily think Robbie was treated fairly at all, but um, I do kind of see the perspective of like the main character being like, I like when you touch me, why does it have to be more than that? Like, why do we, like, I'm figuring out who I am. Why do we have to put these labels on it? Um, and so I thought that was a really interesting perspective. And then something that I was thinking about too, which I don't know, maybe some of you know more about it, but it was in the context of a Quaker boarding school.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
I guess like just from what I saw online, like Quakers are really like one of the tenets is like pacifism,
yeah.
which
Mhm.
so it was interesting that was it oh it was a pig that the main character kills,
Yeah.
then he's kicked out, but I don't know, like he had that awful teacher, wasn't accepted, and then yeah, there's like I think Quakers are more aligned with like social justice issues. But that was like a rough environment for kids. I don't know.
And
It's still,
silence is a big part of Quakerism too. Like they have I forget what it's called, but they have these times where you literally just sit in silence.
mm,
And so it's interesting that that was sort of like the penultimate moment where they're both not saying anything,
Hmm.
kind of waiting for each other to say something. That was sort of an interesting like echo of that as well. It was just it was truly such a good short story.
Yeah.
I think too, like the obvious display of violence to prove masculinity or like
Mhm.
have that be an attracting force of Robbie to the main character is present in all of the stories now that I'm thinking about it. And that's just
Yeah.
such a cultural expectation for men to be violent. And like that is a masculine trait. Really weird. Also, like modesty remains a Quaker value is something that I'm
Mhm.
seeing. And it's interesting too, the physicality of like the sexual moments between them and like the description of the stolen lingerie like that. I feel like that is really interesting in the Quaker sense too. I wonder why. Yeah, I'd be interested to Google if like Torrey Peters comes from a Quaker community or something. Hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting too. And I feel like Arizona gets this as well, but I grew up in Montana and you'll have like sort of these liberal pockets, like, and Quakers aren't necessarily liberal per se, but they're like more liberalish compared to, like other parts of like Colorado, Montana, or whatever. Um, but because you are sort of in this environment where there's farming and agriculture and nature,
Yeah.
you still have that kind of masculinity, like harshness and the need to perform that, um, which I think is like right on the nose as far as that sort of environment goes.
Yeah, I love that. And then Robbie's like just pure obsession
Yeah.
with which like speaks to teenagehood so well. It's
Yes.
like, him wanting him to notice him and acknowledge him in public
Yeah.
and
Even if it was negatively, like,
right.
yeah.
Robbie.
We're Robbie.
Robbie. Pig scene was brutal.
Oh,
Yeah, that was really hard to
Yeah.
read.
I
I
was
was like,
like,
oh.
Yeah.
yeah. I don't feel like I'm super sensitive to reading about
it
animal
was
deaths, but
tough
that was
though.
a bad one. Yeah.
But that is like that farming aspect. Like I grew up with
That wasn't
neighbors.
farming. That was freaking him going for poor
No,
little.
no, but I mean like kind of the
What
brutality
was
that goes with
murder?
that. Because my neighbors raised pigs with 4-H, and like we went over to like hang out with the pigs, and me and my brother were like in like early elementary school, and we're like, we love the pigs, like they're so fun. Can we do this? And my dad was like, do you know what happens to the pigs? Like, it's just tough.
We went to the county fair this week because it's in town, and we were like walking through the pig and cow section for 4-H, and my husband was like literally crying. He was like, I can't be here.
Yeah,
Like, they're
Oh,
all gonna die.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's so fun. I'm sorry.
I know.
He was going through like emotional turmoil, and I'm like, that's hilarious.
He's way too affected by animals. It's like unreasonable sometimes.
Oh, that's funny.
Stag Dance. I think Stag Dance was my favorite story, you guys, which is so weird. I think I like Westerns, like is my
Yes, isn't that
understanding.
so fun?
It's so weird. Like I loved In the Distance by Hernan Diaz, and I loved The Sisters Brothers by Patrick DeWitt. They're like
Oh,
they're both modern westerns, but like there's something about that is like scratching ancient part of my brain where I'm like, yes, like let's buckle up, baby. Um, I don't even know if you would call it if you would call it a western though, would you? Or like more like adventure log? Like what would you call that
yeah.
story?
It
I
was so
wouldn't
funny
say
too, because this is now I'm bringing up Montana again. I think it's set in the Beartooths, right? They're in the
Yeah.
Beartooths, which is in like more eastern Montana. And I mean, they definitely have logging there, or they used to, I would say, have had logging there. Logging was sort of kind of a, a live industry and we're, because obviously trees are alive, so they have to move different parts and public lands and all that kind of stuff. But I always think of logging as Western Montana because I lived in Missoula for like 10 years, and that's very Western Montana. And there was like a huge old logging mill right outside Missoula that was still functioning and I think is now fully shut down. But I thought that was interesting because I was like, oh, when I think of logging in Montana, I think that's just a geographical note.
Yeah.
Not that she's wrong, but
Geographically, I was not sure where we were at just because I've lived in Arizona my entire life. I lived in Georgia for a little bit, for like 3 years on and off, but the majority of my life has been in Arizona. So when I think of logging, I think of like the north, like the Pacific Northwest,
Yeah.
or like just where there's a lot of trees. I don't know.
yeah. And so like I kind of group Missoula in the Pacific Northwest. So Western Montana is much more green and like what you're describing,
Okay.
where Eastern Montana is much more like parts of Arizona, which
Oh,
is funny. Yeah.
interesting. Okay. Yeah. Contentious take. I think Stag Dance was my least favorite.
I can see that.
Um, but it was my favorite ending.
Yes, that was so good.
So it was my favorite ending, but getting there was my least favorite.
This one, I think I liked it so much because the voice
Mhm.
shift was so radical and had to have taken so much effort. You know what I mean? I was like, she is writing her fucking ass off. Like it is, I feel like it's so much easier to write a contemporary story
Yeah.
than a historical one. And like the verbiage, the language, the exact metaphors used, like I thought it was really funny sometimes too. Um I loved this one. And I also loved, I guess, like these weird pieces of history where rituals like this did take place and learning more about them and how, I guess, visibility and like exposure is such a limitation for expression. I guess like it that's what it made me think about how much we don't know and how much was able to happen because you knew that it would never go anywhere besides like where it was happening, like the what's happened in Vegas stays in Vegas of it all, but like for lumberjacks, uh,
Yeah.
that's like really what it made me think is like, wow, without the risk of being found out or publicized or ostracized, if this word of you having sex with men
Mhm.
in your logging camp got out, like people were just up to all different kinds of shit back in the day. They really were, and we've become so Puritan and just like cleansed as a society. I'm like, maybe we all need to go back to the woods and cut up some wood and fuck each
Yeah.
other. Like that's probably what we do need as a society.
I thought that was interesting. The isolation, like what does isolation grant you?
Yeah.
The
Mhm.
ability to experiment with whatever or whomever you want, whether that's with a person or just like with nature or just like with your mind or like however that experimentation, wherever that experimentation takes you. But even within that isolation, the main character, do we get a name for this main character? I finished
Uh,
like
well,
three.
he's called
I think just
called
Babe.
Babe, yeah, which
They,
is really something he doesn't like.
so he has the reputation though, and he's worried about his reputation somewhere like 3/4 of the way in. So
Yeah.
even though he has that freedom, and the other loggers have the freedom because the other loggers are married and they have kids, but they're like so far removed from that reality. And they are able to partake into this, like, joke, but not a joke type of thing with their stag dance. But the babe, or whatever they call him, he's hyper aware of the fact that, like, once it's pointed out to him that because he's wearing the patch, he will be rebranded within the logging community, just to me speaks to the way that like those societal norms will still somehow find a way to infiltrate that like isolated space that you're trying to create.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because something I think about nowadays, it and sort of because I have queer family members and stuff that are older, is I think as like a cis, you know, middle class white lady, I don't have to necessarily think about my identity a lot. Um, but people that express themselves differently, sexuality wise, gender wise, they have to think about their identity a lot more. And then in the past, when you are away from all that technology, you're in the middle of the woods by yourself, you also have the time to think about that. But then, like, with the history of not having that modeled in places where you look on your phone and you like see somebody that's trans, like even Torrey Peters on Instagram, that's like modeled for you, and you have like words for it. But in this situation, you have more time to think about your identity, even without those words. I don't know. I think that's like sort of interesting, because I think it's like sort of a two-sided coin for people these days where they have the words and obviously there's hate and a bunch of gross stuff going on, but also you have the distraction of everything and maybe the pressure to put labels on things. And that's something Tori is challenging just overall with this book. That was like a little galaxy brain, but
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, like something I really saw in this story and then the masker is how important it is for the identity to be validated, like especially when you're first like testing it out. Like we see these characters um yeah, exploring and then getting validated in that way by another character and how like we don't like I don't or you might not like think about how important that is. I mean, I I think as like just as women, like sometimes we feel that like we're taught to feel that way around men, like if we're heterosexual, like we need them to validate our femininity. But yeah, like seeing it in these other senses is really important.
I think this story specifically had a lot to do with beauty too, and
mhm.
go back to what you just said, Brittany, like beauty being validated and in a convention that fits whatever you're trying to yearn for or achieve. Um, and I loved that the babe was so, I mean, who knows if he was ugly, but he was definitely not femme. Uh,
Mhm.
and that was like constantly brought up and held against him. And he didn't care so much that he still wanted to wear the patch or the triangle, forget what they call it. And I
Hmm.
love that too, that it was like a physical thing that they literally took on and off, and it like changed their role in the camp. Like that's such a fun way to think about gender expression and transness specifically, of I guess the how much it changes how people relate to you, but also how it's like a choice. You know what I mean? Like it's like literally just a choice that you're making, and it's
Hmm.
not good or bad or have any like more morality to it. It just is.
Yeah. Something I thought was funny was I really liked Leeson. Is that how you guys pronounced it in your head?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Leeson's character was really funny to me. Just because not because like his persona was funny, but the when he first gets described as like drawing, like selecting the men and
Yeah.
drawing them, and then like he's like really coy and like flirtatious and doesn't want to show the drawings, and then they end up like tussling in the snow, and it's like very romantic and like just like very idyllic. And then when the babe finally gets that experience, he sees the picture and he's like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah.
It
He's
was
like,
He's
babe,
so
like,
good.
"You
look,
suck." He's like,
stuck a drawing.
which I don't know if that speaks to anything on a higher level. I thought it was really funny, but it's just like I don't know if it speaks to like performative, like putting on a performance or like
Or like
something.
mystique, right? I think it has to do with like the feminine mystique
Mhm.
and like being coy and like the power that I don't know, that unknowing granted Lisa in the camp, when it really was just like him
Yeah, he
doing
was just
some
drawing like stick
bullshit.
figures.
Yeah.
I thought that was really funny. It was like a nice like comedic relief, but like
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, okay. So the end, forget what happens in the end, you guys. So
Oh, it's so good.
they
The
go to the
aggro
stag dance.
pelter.
Yeah, they go to the stag dance. The jig is up. He found
Mhm.
out that they ratted him out to the logging boss or whatever.
He gets shot.
They shoot him.
Yeah.
He gets some money from a homie and crawls back to that cave that they did gay shit in. And they come looking for him, and the babe turns into an actual monster.
I don't think they go looking for him. Don't they go looking for um the not sheriff, but the, the logging inspector guy or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, like kind of moseying around to see if they can find him because they don't want him to basically because they were like, "Oh, if he would have to go get a group to like basically come arrest all of us. So like if we can get to him, then he won't be able to get to that group."
Yeah. So after the whole
Mhm.
chaos happens at the stag dance, whatever his name is and Leeson go back to the cave that Leeson and the babe were originally in, and then that's where the babe comes out. But he's like half dead, and then like I don't think he turns into the agropelter is based off the description. From what they
Mhm.
described the agropelter being in the beginning to how they describe, and then it changes from POV. Did you
Yeah.
Mhm.
catch that? I thought that was really good because
And
now,
Leeson's pronouns change too.
Yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
I thought that was really clever too.
And it fully echoed what his friend, who was the one that gave him, like, the little escape pack or whatever, had told him with the mice, but also basically how the agropelter, like, turned into the agropelter,
Right.
which was like chef's kiss.
Right. Yeah, that's why I was like, this ending was
Yeah.
so good. It was difficult for me getting there just because I don't know shit about logging or being anywhere near trees. And so I just didn't know all the terminology. So
Yeah, I was
I'm
Googling.
just gonna, we're just gonna skip past this a little bit. But that ending was super good. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, so then basically, Diag, what is his name? Diagnon or something? The
Aglet.
Oh,
Yes. So
Yeah.
he like gets murked and then
Mhm. Yeah.
Leeson's like kind of running around crying.
Yeah, I think so.
What do we think that means? Like, I guess I didn't do enough research into the agropelter and like his lore and like what his stance is in the woods and like if he is looking for evil men or something. Like, did anyone do research into the agropelter? Is that like a real woodsman?
No, I just took it at face value.
Yeah, and that's like something I was like, oh, this afternoon I'll listen to like a bunch of her interviews and like do
Yeah.
some more Googling I haven't had time to
Mhm.
do.
But like essentially Leeson turned into like the damsel in distress.
hmm
And then the agropelter cuts open the crotch and like does it steal the sex organs?
Mhm. Oh,
No.
that's Leeson, right? He does that
Yes.
does,
He
does that to Leeson.
low-key just slices
Oh,
like
a
a
triangle.
triangle and takes the triangle
Yeah.
for himself.
Yeah.
But she had also ripped off the triangle when they like kind of got into that, not lovers quarrel, but it was kind of a lovers quarrel when they were all fighting over this trash man. I was like, do not fight over him.
You know,
He's
hate
so
Douglas.
trash.
Well, they were arguing over the money, right? It was like he
Yeah.
stole the money and then he's like, "No, I didn't." Well, I had to because, the babe opened his mouth to the inspector and now we're all
Yeah, but
screwed.
Leeson came in because they were mad about the babe like canoodling with
Yeah.
the head guy. Yeah.
Yeah. What a story.
Oh, it's real. Okay. It's a mythical creature said to inhabit hollow trees. Um, Interesting. It doesn't really give me more than that. I think I like the name too. Like this might be me reaching, but like aggro, aggressive, masculine,
Mm.
pelter, pelt. Like they're literally wearing a pelt of like the
Mm.
triangle. You know what I mean? Like I wonder if the aggro pelter is someone who seeks masculinity via clothes or something. So I don't know. Like there's
Well,
something there in the etymology.
Yeah.
yeah. Because in that story that his friend told, when he was like, no, this is real, and this whole mice phenomena thing or
Yeah.
whatever, it was this man who basically kind of wanted to, experiment with his gender,
Mm.
and then the camp turning against him. And so then an evil spirit like overtook his body, and then he became the agripelter.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so fun.
Do we think the mice are supposed to symbolize something?
That was my question too, and I haven't done any foraging in my brain for answers there.
Let's Google real
Yeah.
quick.
Wow. You guys should look up. Yeah, do a deep Google after this. Like the weird like woodcut carvings of the agripelter are
Ugh.
so fucking weird. It's like a monkey. It's like a furry monkey with like scary tentacle arms. Ew. Love him. Okay. Um
Hmm.
Wow.
yeah, I don't know. I had fun. It felt a little long sometimes, but I was like down for the ride and like in the tall tale of it all, you know? Like gender is a tall tale.
Hmm.
Um, damn, Tori Peters, your brain.
Well, and I
Uh,
might have misinterpreted this, but I, it seemed cool, like if this is what it was, like that it wasn't any gender expression or anything that made him outcasted. I mean, there was a lot of thought about it, but it was just ratting out the group. Like that's what
Mhm.
like made him
Yes.
exiled.
Well, but it also was the point where, which I feel like is the classic go-to, where somebody shows something a little bit different. So then when something like that does come up, it's like, nope, get out of here now.
Oh, yeah.
Where it was like he showed that vulnerability, and it was like, oh, gotcha. Now you gotta go. Like this doesn't work for us.
Well, yeah, because one of the, I forgot, it was the older man who he was like homies with, was like,
Mhm.
you've put that patch on now. So now whatever you do after that is going to be scrutinized even more
Yes.
deeply than it would have been had you just been the babe this whole time.
Yep.
Nobody would have believed that you ratted us out had you never put that patch on.
Mhm.
That's a
So,
good point.
mhm, crazy.
Man.
on Cryptid Wiki. Wow, that's gonna be a fun Google after this. Okay. And then we get to the Masker, which is set in Las Vegas. We have, what do they call him? A sissy boy, maybe?
Mhm.
And a masker. I had not been aware of what a masker is before, but it does
Yeah.
scare me a little bit. Um, just like the visual of it, not more so anything else. I probably enjoyed this story the least. I love the idea of Las Vegas, like the artifice, the performance of it all, the just manufactured reality everywhere you look. Like I love that as a person. That's my shit. And I think it's a good set for the story and to explore gender and transness. I don't really know why I didn't enjoy this one that much. I just think in context of the other ones, it felt like not my favorite. What did you
E-
think?
I think some of it might have been it was a little more talky.
Maybe, yeah.
Because Sally was obviously, but that was also just her character. She was like kind of spewing a lot of information slash where the other it was just yeah, I don't know, it was a little bit different in that way.
I don't know, maybe it meant like I don't know if this is reaching, maybe because to me, I felt uncomfortable at the end. I was like, ugh, I was like, she
Yeah.
betrayed her. Now she's like this submissive person to this other person who is like obviously not a good person. He's like a piece of shit. I don't can't remember their gender or what their like, whatever it was, but it made me more uncomfortable in terms of just like I don't want to say the realities of the community, but I guess so, like how like insidious sometimes it is, and that it's not always like, yay, community, like we're all in this together, that there's still like strife and like, you know, infighting and violence towards each other. And not violence just as in like physical violence, but like emotional. and like mental games as well. And I don't know if maybe it was supposed to make us feel uncomfortable as people outside of the community. Um, but yeah, I definitely felt uncomfortable towards the end because I thought it was going to be like, oh no, she's not going to betray her, but she does.
Yeah. I mean, I
So,
think you have Sally, who's like what you think of as a trans woman, right? She's fully transitioned. She's done
yeah.
all the surgeries. She thinks that anyone else who's not doing what she has done to achieve like happiness within her gender is not there yet or doing it wrong or, still closeted in some part of themselves. And I
Mm,
think our characters confused about that too and like where they actually see themselves in their future as it relates to the gender expression going and like respect Sally as like an elder, but also is like, I think I might get more turned on than like still having a dick. And like, you know what I mean? Like all of the
Yeah.
things that she's not adhering to. So I
yeah.
thought it was interesting there, like I guess the nuance and fluidity within gender, like we've been talking about this whole time.
Hmm.
But I guess I'm confused, and so is the character about like where they wanted to be in that spectrum too. Because the last line of this is, oh God, um, we are both still for the barest moment. Then I lick his tongue back and tell myself that this is hot. I tell myself that this is better than ending up like Sally. I tell myself that this is what I want. So I guess maybe they are figuring out like, she looked down on Sally for having fully transitioned and like being so ascribed to what it means to be a woman and like wanted to do something different in like this sissy masker relationship, like more niche fetish within transness and trans expression. But she's like, actually, maybe this is fucking weird. Maybe it's not for me.
Yeah.
And I think, and I could be totally off base, some of it feels like a little bit generational in that
Yeah.
Sally is like,
Mm,
oh, in her 60s. And like, number one, I have to look out for like the youngest person in the group, but also like, I'm checking all the boxes to be this person I want to be, but also kind of what society wants me to be.
Yeah.
Even outside the community, it's like obviously our society is not nice to trans people, but they're nicer to trans people that like pass and do all of those things
mhm.
or fit in a specific mold like Sally does. Where I think some of like the younger generation is like allowing for that grayness where it's like, oh, it might not look this way for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to be like sort of chained to that.
Yeah, that's a better way to say what I was trying to say.
Something that's clicking for me right now is all these stories took place in a bubble, like within Vegas, you could say, or at this conference or whatever it was, and then within a logging community, within a boarding school, within, I don't know, people in apocalyptic world, like finding a
Yeah.
community there.
Mhm.
And I guess it's interesting to see how like extremes come out in those situations. People find their place in relation to other people. And so we just see, yeah, people reacting to their environment and the people around them. And so, I mean, yeah, you're just going to see all types of different characteristics and personalities.
I
Mhm.
forget if it was Rebecca Mackay that I heard interviewed. So it was about um what book is it? It's mm, you know the one that her most recent one. It's like a
Yeah,
long title.
I have questions to tell you.
Yes, I have some
Yeah.
questions for you. Yeah, that sounds right. She was talking about how, as far as devices go, like authors, number one, obviously love boarding schools because it's like, quote unquote, a space for a lot of change just in life, but it's also that seclusion, which I think is what you're talking about, where it's like, oh, like I can just literally like, microscope in on these people, which I thought was funny
Mhm.
because I never thought about, I haven't taken an English class since high school, so I haven't thought about that. But now every single time something like that, I'm like, oh, it's a device.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Anything else we didn't cover, fam?
I don't think so.
I'm just really intrigued by the dedication. If you guys saw that, like it was
Oh, what is it? Mine says dedication to come.
Yes, I
oh,
Oh,
did.
intrigued by that too. It was to Cecilia, you asked me to hang out, but instead I worked on this novel and then you were gone.
Oh, yeah. That felt resonant with like some of the stories too. When you like think about like the T for T and then, oh, I guess that's not what the actual story was called. Infect your friends and loved ones. Like
mhm.
people wanting to hang out at the beginning, and that's how the friendship started to fracture. And then the chaser, obviously, it was
Yeah.
that note. Yeah.
Like my mind immediately went to like death, like, oh, this person died. But it could also just be that they drifted apart.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, I guess I didn't think of that. I was like, maybe Cecilia will see this, and then
Who is
mm.
Cecilia?
I don't know.
Well, she's in the acknowledgments. Hold on, I'm Googling.
FBI at work.
Gently. Yeah, she died.
Oh,
Oh,
shucks.
okay.
Oh, I
Yeah.
remember when she died, actually. Oh, yeah, she got killed.
Oh my God.
Uh,
Oh.
yeah, she was like a New York trans activist.
Oh, that's
Oh.
sad.
Yeah.
On a happier note, I haven't listened to it yet, but if anybody's a fan of Sam Sanders, NPR, well, former NPR delight, he has his own show and he interviewed Torrey, and I've been waiting till after I finished this book, which ended up being too close to this book club to listen to it, but he said it's one of his favorite interviews he's ever done. And it's the Sam Sanders show, I think.
Nice.
Okay.
That's not Sam Frangernel. No, it's a different guy with the
No, he does vibe check too. He used to do be an NPR politics performer,
okay.
reporter, not performer, sorry. Reporter, and then he did It's Been a Minute for years.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking about. Okay.
Okay, yeah. He's so wonderful. He's just, I don't know. I think he's brilliant. And now he has his own show, which is so wonderful because he left his It's Been a Minute show for, I think, a show with Vulture. And
Mhm.
that got like canceled because of budget cuts. Like after a year, it was such a good show. And this is sort of like his new little baby. So
Yeah, I liked that Vulture podcast. That was
me too.
good. I didn't know that happened. Okay, good. Um, yeah, I love that flavor of podcast. I would also recommend Critics at Large,
Oh,
New
yes.
Yorker, if you like that same vibe of smart people
Chatting.
conversations. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks, guys. We're reading Brother Bronte by Fernando Flores, and I need to read that. They've all shipped. Um, they did not come with a signed book plate because the publisher also didn't send them to me in time. But if that happens, I will send them to you in the mail, just like I'm supposed to be getting these signed book plates in the mail. So I
Okay.
was like, I'm actually never trusting the publisher again when they tell me they're giving me those. I'm like, damn, twice in a row.
Dang.
It's rude. It's rude.
Oh.
Um, and then I need to post this because I'm behind on my life, but we're gonna read Authority by Andrea Longchu, who um also did an interview with Torrey Peters, and there's a podcast I listen to. So it's all connected, you guys. It's all connected. That's an essay collection, nonfiction about the role of criticism, literature, whatever. It's gonna be great.
Well,
Awesome. Well, see you guys next
Yay.
time.
Thank you guys. Good to see you.
Bye.
Thanks.